Okay, so now our next panel, looking over the horizon in K12. India has approximately 270 million students in K12, and they come from a wide range of backgrounds. They vary across economic, cultural, and social factors. Here are some of the leading minds in K12 education. We will have the founder of the largest chain of K12 schools in South India, Sushma Boppana. Sumeet, who is a co-CEO of Lead School, but actually, I think he came to be known as the husband of Smita yesterday. Amit Zaveri, who runs Get Set Learn under the Mafatlal umbrella. Akhil Quest, who runs a new age formative assessment company. And Jaspal Sidhu, who despite an accident and surgery has made it here today from Singapore. So please welcome our moderator, Divya Venkat, principal at Lightrock India, and our panelists.
Good afternoon, everybody. You've got the best slot in the day, if I may say so, post-lunch. Firstly, congratulations to everyone today in this ecosystem. Schools are back. So I think we can say that after the 3 years of crisis that we've been facing as a sector, to all of us here, a big congratulations for having survived. That in itself feels like an achievement today. Just to give some context to everybody in the room. Now, while India has about 270 million school-going children, 50% of them attend private schools. And school choice, however, has not resulted in outcomes. And that's the learning emergency that India has been facing for many years now. I want to get started and maybe start safe and just request everyone to share the biggest takeaway from the whole, the past 3 years of the pandemic, especially given the varied backgrounds we have and the focus on schools. Maybe we start from that corner, Jaspal.
Well, thank you. So I run schools in Indonesia, Myanmar, and we've got a campus in Chennai. So the pandemic taught us 3 things. One, K-12 schools, brick and mortar are here to stay. One of the things that I became worried about was technology going to disrupt K-12? So if you don't believe in that, you don't have children. You want to have kids and you want them out of the house. So K-12 brick and mortar schools are here to stay. I'm energized. We're going to build more schools. The second thing, there was a level of comfort on technology. People became comfortable. Parents became comfortable. The third thing was a focus on teachers. Suddenly, there was a level playing field. You would have an auditorium. I may not have an auditorium. Auditorium is out of the picture. It was teachers on teachers. And schools that delivered the best online program did extremely well. So for us, our enrollment actually went up 16% post-pandemic because we paid a lot of attention on teachers. So that was the positive aspect. The negative aspect was teacher stress went up. Because one thing the online did was it brought parents very close to the school. Suddenly they became education superintendents, telling teachers what to do. So that level of stress went really up. On the neutral side is school design. So we have conversations on what would be a post-pandemic school. How do we really design these brick and mortar schools? So those were my findings.
Yeah. I run a company called Quest, which is a combination of formative assessment plus AI to create personalized learning path for students. My biggest learning was how teachers and schools quickly understood how to use technology to embrace to what was called back then a new normal. And in that process, they understood what is the technology that is here to stay and what is a temporary technology. Because for the first time, they were pushed to use technology for all the aspects of the education. And that's where they understood that when the schools will reopen, what is that is going to sustain, what is that is going to go back. And I think that is what we are going to see now, The technology that really adds value is here for a long term. Technology which was just a placeholder for an online school might go back. And obviously, it led to massive adoption of technology. Everyone made sure, and that was hard for both teachers and parents to make sure that they have access to technology. They're learning how to use different pieces of software on a weekly basis. There were so many people who were making sure that this learning curve happens in a very, very small time. So I think that's what my learning was.
I think for me, it became real what was the real purpose of school. So we all thought schools provide education, but the moment the pandemic hit, we realized that the primary role a school was performing was childcare. All parents were just so distraught that they had to take care of their own kids for 24 hours, because so far they had been outsourcing that for 8 hours a day to schools. And therefore, when they were not getting that benefit, they were refusing to pay fee to that school, because if the kid is at home, I am providing the internet, I am providing the device, and I have to sit with the kid to ensure they pay attention to the screen, why am I paying the school? So it became very real that schools were actually living in a bubble, thinking that they were in the business of education, while the real business was childcare. And there were, of course, secondary benefits of schools, which is that there was peer learning and there was knowledge transfer. And while this is funny, but I think the tragedy was that most parents realized when they were sitting in front of a screen along with their child, the level of education that was being provided was not up to the mark. So therefore, there was a lot of conflict between schools and parents in terms of while education was happening within the four walls, and parents were outside the gate, nobody knew what was happening in the classroom. But the moment the classroom came to the home, everybody, it was kind of apparent to everybody that schools really were not performing their purpose. So I think after the pandemic, the big opportunity is that can schools really upgrade themselves to perform their real purpose, which is to prepare a child for the exam of life, not just to do rote learning and get them to pass exams year on year. And if we don't take this big opportunity now post the pandemic, then I think we would have not utilized the challenge of COVID for its real opportunity, which is upgrading schools to perform their real purpose and not just do rote learning and exam preparation.
And if I may, use that as an opportunity. So, do you feel, or given, we have Sushma, for example, that other schools at least have started caring about learning outcomes?
No, I think the pandemic demonstrated one thing. Yeah. The schools who are good at teaching and meeting the goals and convincing the parents that they're doing well, they have stayed and they have come back full force. Schools that they were just doing monotonous job definitely are dying down. I think that is where the care needs to be taken, because India, having said the K12 population is 270 million, we need so many good schools to cater to that kind of numbers. So few good schools will not be good enough. And the pandemic time also has shown us that just pure academics is not good enough. Student well-being is the most important thing. And when the kids came back, we run about 725 schools across country. So when the kids came back, it was so difficult to keep them in their chairs for 6 hours a day, because they were moving around in the house and, no one knew what they were doing the whole time. So, just to increase that focus, that mentoring, the well-being, mindfulness, all of that, I think it has become an integral part of learning now. I think in our schools, and I'm sure most other schools also have realized that. I think the teachers struggle the most. Kids get onto technology quite easily. But traditional teachers who've been teaching the same way for like tens of years, for them to suddenly understand technology and be impactful on a screen is not easy. And our teachers have struggled. The first 3 months, our teachers have really struggled. And we have the better lot of teachers compared to anyone else in the country, because we do frequent monthly trainings, bi-monthly trainings. So, but they have caught up. They have caught up with it. And, to what Sumeet had mentioned, there's both positive and negative to it. I think our parents realize the amount of follow-up we do, the amount of information we give the students as well, because they were part of those classes. And we had so many video sessions with parents during this time to keep them motivated, to keep the students motivated during this time, because now we were mentors if they are in the classroom, but then parent is a parent and also a mentor during that period, because they have to take care and they have to push the students to wake up on certain time, attend classes, work, and do that. But the one learning, I think one important learning that made us start an EdTech company is, purely online will not suit most students in India. Given the kind of students we have, given the kind of parents we have, the hand-holding level from childhood is very, very high in India. You can find only 5% of students who are extremely motivated to do on their own without no one checking on them. Unfortunately, that's the fact, either we agree or not. So for those set of students, they have to be in the classroom. Otherwise, they are losing their potential. They do not have the opportunity to keep pushing themselves if they don't find a competitive environment around them and competitive people around them to keep motivating them in a certain way based on the mentality or psychology of the student. So during that time, we have seen a huge loss in learning. I think every student was behind by a year because of lack of work, not lack of teaching. It lack of work on their behalf, on their part, which the parent also was not able to motivate at one point of time. Parents and kids were fighting at home because parent would say, you go study, children would stay, you get annoyed with it. So it's not easy. Whereas when a teacher motivates, a student is willing to listen out of respect and, they probably understand them better in that sense. But when at home, a kid gets annoyed, especially a teenage kid. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think, concur with most of the points that have been spoken about. And, one thing that got caught out is that, after the pandemic has been over, I completely agree with Sushma where she says, the pure online models are something that we need to rethink. Because when people started teaching online, kids started learning online, the outcomes and, you see and you hear how many bridge courses that the kids have to kind of go through to actually cover up on what, loss in learning that has happened, actually. The other part, I think, is hybrid is here to stay, where a lot of delivery of content and services, though in classroom, I think there's a lot of value also to the online piece. So I think we need to kind of combine the two, build out an ecosystem that kind of fosters learning through online and offline mediums. And I also agree that a lot of focus now is more than ever the debate is on well-being, which was not happening earlier. I think kids have kind of gone through a lot of trauma in that sense. To kind of be at home, not being able to play outside, not being able to kind of meet friends, and I think at some level, that actually also kind of brings out the whole online piece, not being the only platform to kind of work with. So yeah, I think most of the points, I had in mind have been spoken about, but yeah, that's where it is.
Yeah, I just had one follow-up, right? So what does technology in schools really look like? What type of technology really works? Because I don't think we're living in a world where it's recorded content, right? So what does that look like? And any of you?
Maybe I can start. I think first we have to differentiate between online and digital. Sometimes we kind of combine these two terms and it is not the same thing. I think in schools, if the outcome that we want is great student learning, then the path has to be multimodal learning, which means that there is a role for the teacher-directed learning, there is a role for audiovisual learning, and there is a role for students doing it with their hands. And in the audiovisual learning, there is a role that the digital part can play. But to answer your question, I think the most important role of technology in the school is twofold. One is to empower the teacher so she can actually be much more equipped to deliver the teaching learning process in the way it should be, because most of our teachers are very attuned to doing the rote lecture-based method. They're not as equipped to do multimodal learning. And second is, how do you monitor student learning through the use of data and therefore make personalized remediation? If you do these two things in a school, then schools can actually upgrade, like I was saying, from this 1:40 mass rote learning approach to really personalized learning where every child is learning and then growing to their true potential. I would say these two are the roles which technology can play in a school.
So if I can add, we have private equity in our group, and they look at returns. So we are quite clinical in the way we look at technology. The way we look at is, we see it in 3 stages, and these are not my terms. One is your technology, is it digitally assisting teaching? This is your PowerPoint, right? It's your chalk and talk. She prepares, that's it. It can be exciting. The audios and visuals get excited. People get excited by it, but that's that. The second one is interactive teaching. Those are your apps. And there's a lot of excitement, collaboration, team building. The third one that I'm actually looking for is innovative teaching. This is where you are so comfortable with tech that tech doesn't sit in the center of your action. Tech is on the side. You are actually beginning to experiment. You're beginning to be spontaneous. This is where attitudes change. So even my schools, I can tell you, we haven't reached to the third stage. Everyone is hovering around interactive teaching. I'm looking at attitudes being formed that will result in this experimentation where they can use any tech to start doing these sort of things. So those attitude change is what I'm looking for in my own organization.
And we use technology mainly for areas where it would benefit the student. Like in biology, showing a 3D diagram where a student can immediately understand how a leaf is or what a heart is and how it functions, right? So it's all need-based. It should be need-based. It's not something that can be done for every single subject, every single topic, for every single grade. If the teacher uses it as need-based, he takes more interest in putting it together. Because most good teachers don't like being given some content and say, you teach in this order, line to line, this is the notes given to you. We have tried that. But none of the teachers were impactful in that manner. But teachers who prepared the content on their own, at least part of the content, were very successful in the classroom. And one other learning from the pandemic is that keep the class lively. As engaging, as lively, as interactive as possible. It's just because it's a captive audience, it means you can just talk and they'll listen and listen. You know, the learning is not going to happen, right? So using technology in that way is, I think, very impactful. And the second part is assessment. You know, we prepare most of our students are prepared for test prep. Assessment is the core. And Indian mentality is built in such a way, has developed in such a way, if you change the assessment in a particular way, the learning changes in that way, right? If we make our assessments more concept-oriented, fundamental-oriented, thinking-oriented, student, teachers, everyone will mold to that. And they will start thinking in that same manner. So based on that assessment, that adaptive learning, and also the correction of whatever mistakes the students have done, is a great feature we have in Infinity Learn now, which we are using for Sri Chaitanya students as well. So the classroom and the assessment, I think, are the greatest strengths that technology can bring, because a lot of reports, a lot of data can be generated, which is instantly available to the student and the teacher.
How do we scale excellence in teaching? I think that's a problem where we have failed miserably as a country.
You know, that's...
We actually work with some 50,000 teachers across the country. And you're right, I think if we have to really make impact at scale, the path to that is through the teacher. I think we need to recognize that 95% of teachers in India today are not able to pass the teacher eligibility test. So there is a real teacher capability and teacher skill issue. And now we can hope that, we will be able to train all these teachers and take 5, 10, 15 years to do that. But then 5, 10, 15 generations would have passed school, right? So we've got to be able to do it in a way which is both scalable and can move with velocity. The path that we have seen is that if we are able to empower the teacher with guided lesson plans, with resources that she can use, with preparation before the class, and with help from tech that she is able to figure out which student is lacking in which area, and therefore able to do personalized remediation, that path so far, across these 50,000 teachers has been working well, because then we can measure their impact on their students' learning. So my sense is that, I have less faith in classroom teacher training, because it's very hard for them to listen to something and then go translate it in their classroom. But I have a high faith in empowering the teacher with a tool that she can use in the classroom. And that, I think, is scalable.
So when it comes to...
Yes, that's my pet project. Folks, as I reduce fees, I have two issues. Infrastructure, I need to look at infrastructure creatively, and teachers. As you reduce fees, you start hiring from communities, and they're stuck with traditional teaching, right? So how do I scale this? I did a project with Deloitte, Singapore, and I told Deloitte, find me what are the HR cutting-edge ideas outside the education industry. For me, the education industry is broken, the ideas exist outside. So we had this long exercise looking at Facebook, Starbucks, Google, Apple, and there were many learnings over 18 months. There were about 10 which were relevant. Right at the top was this: hire for attitude, train for skills. I repeat, hire for attitude, train for skills. And that made me think, what were the fundamental attitude attributes that I needed in my campus? So we, again, went into a deep dive and researched. So we are looking at 8 attributes, which is in the model called the effector model. E is for earnest. You are not highly paid teachers. In fact, your peers are earning 20% more than you. And over time, that gap's going to get bigger. So we look at a quality called earnest, which is humility, which is selflessness. Second F is funny, humor. If you don't have humor, don't be a teacher. Kids levitate to humor. Then F is firm, E is enthusiastic, C is consistency, T is timeliness, O is open-minded, R is researcher. So with Deloitte, we came up with a canvas. Each of these has mapped capabilities, and we executed it Facebook style through a boot camp. I had teachers showing such great qualities through a boot camp. And those who were experienced, who have taught in international schools, said to us, I don't want to join your boot camp. I never had to join boot camp. Why should I join? My community teachers went through boot camps. And I picked some of the finest individuals out there. So there is hope yet. They exist out there. You just have to identify the key attributes and go for it. Hire for attitude, train for skills.
Yeah. Sushma. So coming to teaching, I think teachers and doctors are an entirely separate category because they have to be trusted and they have to treat students or patients, with that. There's a human element to it, right? Any teacher should have the passion to deal with so many kids. Otherwise, it's impossible. If you can't deal with kids, it's just very annoying day after day. I don't think they can do their job. So they should have that passion to begin with. And I really feel that the dry period is over for teaching community. Because 15, 16 years ago when I moved back to India, they were all old teachers. There were hardly any new breed of excellent faculty coming into teaching for K12, especially for test prep. But in the past 7, 8 years, due to the increase in pay scales in teaching communities and a lot of interest has developed. And we see a lot of teachers coming from IITs, NITs, coming into teaching maths, physics, chemistry, biology. I mean, it's wonderful to see that change. I think that will keep on happening. So the initial motivation for people to take on to teaching, I think is very important to increase the pool, the teaching talent, and then motivating them and training them in a proper way. If we can provide online training, certifications, I am sure that will help encourage more brilliant minds who are in other fields also move to teaching eventually. I think that is a basic, first you need to have the proper talent to even train them and introduce them into the classroom.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think in my experience, we have around 22,000 teachers using Quest for connecting formative assessment. And the number one question that we get asked is, how does it save my time? Almost all the teachers are overworked, overwhelmed. They also have to manage a lot of things outside the school, their professional job. And they are not in a position to take any technology which increases their work. Before they ask the question, how does it impact the learning outcome or learning journey for the student, they ask the question, how does it reduce my time from whatever I'm doing right now? And the reality is the ratio is 1:40, 1:30 everywhere. So technology has to reduce the time for teachers and solve to take learning from something more than a common minimum denominator. Because in that ratio, 1:30, 1:40, that's the only thing that can happen. So how does technology reduces time for teacher and, as Sumeet said, empower teachers to do more and make sure each child goes on their own learning pace? I think that's going to be the winner technology to solve for classrooms.
Yeah, so a couple of points, I think one is, the problem is very, very large. If you really look at India, public schools, etc., it's a very, very large problem to solve. And I think it's not just one solution that's going to solve all of it, but it's going to be multiple solutions. So I think what Akhil is talking about, enabling cutting out time, cutting out the burden of actually kind of the other stuff so that they can focus on the teaching problem is critical. I think also, how do you kind of enable these teachers to kind of constantly upgrade themselves? I think Sumeet spoke about that. And I think that's where I think the crux lies. How do you enable 1 million teachers to kind of teach better? So there may be a lot of influx of, bright minds coming in at this point in time, but is it kind of percolating down to the bottom of the pyramid? And I think that problem is not a single solution. I don't see a single solution for that. I think there are multiple solutions built at multiple levels with enabling technologies to be able to solve that. And I've been talking about micro-learning, for example, or micro-credentials, or being able to kind of give teachers incentives to do better, grade them at a particular level. All sorts of things that can be used to solve that. But it's not a single solution to a single problem, to such a large problem. So that's my thoughts.
I think we spoke briefly about how the trust between parents and schools kind of broke down, right? What's this? What's the situation now? Are schools trying to rebuild that at all?
I think, I've seen this over time, and during the pandemic, I think 3 or 4 things happened. Parents stopped trusting teachers and schools. Schools stopped trusting edtech companies, and solution providers. And, there's this whole gap that exists. And education is all about trust. Sushma was just mentioning doctors and teachers. You kind of hand over your child to them to kind of teach better. And I think it's more about trying to fix that problem through a collaborative effort, because the system is soiled in that sense, because nobody's trusting anybody anymore. I know I'm making a very blanket statement around that, but it's something that's happening in the ecosystem, and I'm sure there are some solutions that the school guys have provided.
I disagree with that because we haven't experienced that side. We have always been fortunate with huge trust from the parent community. And throughout the pandemic, we kept receiving numerous requests to open schools even before the government gave the circular. So we haven't experienced the trust factors. Because, of course, we can also do better based on competition, but I guess the parents, for the parents, we are the best they had, given the other circumstances and everything else. But I don't think trust is entirely lacking in private schools. We cannot generalize it. Most private schools are doing well. So I think in probably areas where student well-being, I have seen areas, even because we run 725 branches. Every branch won't be perfect, frankly, right? Yeah. And where the system becomes the center and not the student, that is where the problem comes. It's always student-centric. We are dealing with education where every single individual is as important as the other, and we need to deal with every student individually and come up with a mechanism to do so. So we have an adoption process where every member in the school adopts 5 children, and they take care of the well-being of the child throughout their journey, so they know exactly what that student needs. So wherever things like that are not implemented, the student feels he's not heard. The parent feels they are not being heard. They don't get immediate solutions for the problems they ask. That is where this problem comes up. It's not because of lack of intent, I think. It's because lack of a system to do that kind of process.
This issue of trust is just not at the parents' level. If you want parents to trust your school, then the board must trust the principal must trust the teachers must then work with the parents. Your teachers are your biggest advocates. And if you cannot let your teachers feel that they are in an organization which trusts them, you have a big issue. And how do you win trust? Transparency. You have to be transparent. There's no point showing 3 toppers when the rest of the class is not doing well. I think a school that shows 80% of our students have moved 2 grades, 90% have moved 1 grade. By the way, we got 2 toppers. Is the kind of school that parents want to see. And in terms of trust with principals, we allow our principals and a number of our senior heads and our directors to see the financials of the school. They actually see the EBITDA margins. And we have a lot of feedback systems. Teachers give feedback anonymously on the principal, so I know I don't have a Hitler running in the campus. Parents give feedback on the school, and I always say try not to do it end of the year because disaster has struck, they're going to pull out. Do it in the middle of the year. It shouldn't be punitive. Sit with the school and try to get there. And let your students give feedback on your teachers. I had a lot of problems with my teachers saying, no, I'm not going to let them give feedback on me. But these are kids who are posting on Instagram. You might as well get their feedback now. So trust comes all the way from the board downwards. And I think it's something that schools should look at.
Actually, Sushma runs really good schools. I think the 720 schools that you run seem to be really well-run schools. But I would agree with you. I think during COVID, there was a breakdown of trust between parents because, like I said, I think it all boils down to the quality of education being delivered. And to that point, I agree with you that if the quality is poor, parents are not going to trust the school. And it became very transactional that, how much are you giving me? How much am I paying you? And I believe that, I always have to say that if Lakshmi precedes Saraswati in education, there is a breakdown. You've got to keep learning outcomes at the core. So whichever school was delivering quality, whether it was online, whether it was offline, there will be trust. Whichever school is prioritizing short-term gains, surplus, or taking shortcuts towards student learning, there will be eventual breakdown because ultimately a parent is sending their child to a school because they want a brighter future for the child. And sooner or later, they will figure out that that promise is not being met. And the day they figure this out, they will start either looking for alternatives or pointing out mistakes in the school. And that's the beginning of the breakdown of the trust. And a large part of schools in India are in that place. So I think our job is to, and it's not because of lack of intent. It is sometimes because of lack of resources or lack of knowledge on how to do it. So I think our job, at least companies like us or people like those who are running schools, the job is to empower those kind of schools with the right resources, with the right exposure, with the right system so that they can actually deliver good quality education. Because ultimately everybody wants that, they just haven't found the path to get there. And if you can illuminate that path, then there is hope at the end of the tunnel.
So private schools have always been the stepchild in the education sector in India. So, and we spoke briefly about, how government schools are themselves very struggling yesterday in passing. So any wish list, maybe just one or two things that, all of you would like to see in terms of how the government or the regulator should, change their mindset. And Jaspal, even your experience on that, given PPPs that you've been part of.
Yeah, so I'm not from India. I won't be able to comment on the Indian terrain. But I think I have reached to a point where I think getting public school teachers and getting private schools to train public school teachers will not work anymore. There's no point busing them into your auditorium, put someone in front. To them, it's a junket. Give them a goodie bag and adios, they head back home. In the same culture they're struggling with. I think the key is public-private partnerships where schools work together constantly. For example, can a grade 2 class from a public school do projects with a grade 2 class in a private school? Just not one-off, just not a private school going there and giving them 2 computers, taking pictures and go home. I mean, really year-long projects. And the teachers will be involved. That's where things will change. So we have done that, and it has worked. And I think the other option is run some tenders. Let private schools operate under operate and transfer. I think the Middle East is doing that. Run some schools, give us KPIs, and after X number of years, hand the schools back with very clear KPIs.
The best thing that government can do to support private schools is to let them be. Because I think the reality is in India, we will not be able to solve, government cannot solve the education problem by itself because, half the children go to government schools. There also we are struggling. Let the other half actually go to private schools if the parents afford and let them be because if the regulation is enabling for private schools to operate and not constricting, I think the half of students who are going to private school at least will get good education. That's number one. I think if we do that, that in itself is a big step. Then, of course, I think my wish list is if there's a public-private partnership which is enabling private school operators who are good, people like Sushma or other people who are running good schools, give them some government schools on a very outcome-focused basis and then pay them if they deliver the outcomes. And I think private players can do it at half the cost of what the government does.
Yeah, I think, thank you very much to the panel. It's been a very hopeful discussion. And as we come out of the pandemic, we wish you all the best. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.